The city was wrapped in gray that afternoon, the kind of sky that promised rain but held back just long enough to make everything feel heavy. The glass tower of Carter Enterprises loomed over downtown, its mirrored windows reflecting the storm clouds gathering above. Inside, the marble lobby hummed with the faint echoes of heels, the muted ring of telephones, and the smell of strong coffee. But at the revolving doors, a woman stood still, her hands clutching a small bouquet of white lilies and a carefully packed lunchbox. Her name was Sophia Carter. She was 29, 8 months pregnant, and in that very moment, she carried not just a child, but also the fragile hope that love was enough to hold her life together. Her belly strained against the fabric of her dress, her feet ached from swelling, yet her eyes glowed with anticipation. Today, she wanted to remind her husband that no matter how stressful his work became, she was by his side. She wanted to surprise him, to celebrate his recent promotion with something simple and personal. She whispered softly to her unborn child, rubbing her belly as she adjusted the bouquet in her arms. "We're going to see Daddy, sweetheart. He's been working so hard. He'll be so happy to see us." Her voice trembled, though she didn't notice. It was the tremor of someone desperately clinging to a fairy tale. The elevator doors slid open with a metallic chime. Sophia stepped inside, pressing the button for the 28th floor. As the machine lifted her higher, she let herself drift into memories. She remembered the first time she met David Carter, her husband. He had been everything she thought she wanted. Charming, ambitious, the kind of man who walked into a room and made it brighter. He pursued her with flowers, candlelit dinners, and words that seemed to promise forever. When he proposed, he swore she was his everything. When she told him she was pregnant, he cried, holding her face between his hands, whispering, "This is the happiest day of my life." Sophia clung to those memories as the elevator climbed, floor by floor, each number lighting up like a silent countdown to the truth she was not ready to face. The doors opened to the hushed, pristine hallway of the executive suite. The air here smelled different, more polished, like leather chairs and expensive cologne. Behind a sleek desk sat Margaret, David's longtime secretary, a woman in her 50s with silver-streaked hair and tired eyes. She looked up, and for a brief moment something flickered across her face. Was it pity? Was it warning? "Mrs. Carter," Margaret said gently, "maybe you should wait. Mr. Carter isn't an important—" Sophia cut her off with a smile. "Oh, it's fine. He won't mind. It's our anniversary. I just want to surprise him." She lifted the bouquet and lunchbox, her heart swelling with excitement. Margaret's lips pressed together, but she didn't stop her. Sophia moved forward, her heels tapping against the polished floor. Each step echoed louder than the last, as if the building itself was warning her to turn back. She ignored it. She wanted to believe in love, in loyalty, in the story she had built around her marriage. Her hand closed around the golden handle of David's office door. With a soft push, the heavy oak door swung open. The sight inside shattered her world in an instant. David sat in his leather chair behind the wide mahogany desk. But he wasn't alone. Olivia, Sophia's younger sister, was perched on his lap. Her silky dress slid dangerously high up her thighs, her head thrown back in laughter. David's hands rested on her waist, his face buried in her neck, his lips brushing against her skin. For a moment, they didn't even notice the door. They were too lost in each other. Sophia froze, her breath caught in her throat, her mind refusing to process what her eyes saw. It had to be a mistake, a dream, some cruel trick her tired body was playing on her. But then Olivia's eyes shifted, locking on Sophia's. And instead of shame, Olivia smirked. David jerked back, his face draining of color. He pushed Olivia off his lap so fast she almost stumbled. "Sophia, this isn't what it looks like." His voice cracked with panic. "Not what it looks like." The words slammed into her like a cruel joke. Sophia's fingers loosened. The bouquet slipped from her hand, scattering lilies across the carpet. The lunchbox clattered open, spilling carefully packed food onto the floor. The sound echoed in the room, small but devastating. Her body trembled as if struck by lightning. She clutched her belly, instinctively shielding her child. Tears blurred her vision, but through the haze she saw Olivia leaning against the desk, her smile smug, her eyes cold. "Maybe you shouldn't be here, Sophia," Olivia said smoothly, her voice laced with mock concern. "Stress isn't good for the baby." The words sliced through Sophia like a knife. Her chest rose and fell in ragged gasps. Her heart pounded so loudly it drowned out the storm rumbling outside. She looked at David, the man who swore he would love her forever. And then at Olivia, the sister she had protected her entire life. The betrayal was unbearable, a double-edged wound she never imagined she would face. David stepped forward, his hands outstretched. "Sophia, listen to me. Please, I can explain." She raised her hand, silencing him with a look that burned hotter than fire. For the first time in years, her voice was firm, cold, unshaken. "You don't get to explain." She turned, her swollen body moving with surprising strength. She walked out of the office, her heels clicking like gunshots against the floor. Margaret gasped when she saw her, but Sophia brushed past, her face pale, her eyes wide with devastation. The elevator ride down felt endless. The walls seemed to close in, the air suffocating. Her reflection in the steel door showed a woman she barely recognized. Broken, betrayed, but not defeated. When she stepped out into the storm, the rain poured down in sheets. It soaked her hair, her clothes, her skin. She wrapped her arms around her belly and whispered to her unborn child, "It's okay. Mama's here. Mama won't let them break us." But deep inside, a single question screamed louder than the thunder above. How could she ever come back from this? Before betrayal became the headline of her life, Sophia Carter had once believed she was living the kind of story people envied. She had grown up in a small suburban neighborhood, the eldest daughter in a modest family. Her parents, hard-working immigrants, instilled in her a simple truth: love and loyalty were the pillars of a good life. As a child, Sophia absorbed those values like air. She babysat her younger sister Olivia, helped her mother fold laundry late into the night, and listened to her father's stories about sacrifice. She wasn't the most glamorous girl in her high school. She wasn't the one who dazzled at dances or filled the yearbook with smiling photos. She was quiet, studious, reliable. People came to her when they needed help with homework or someone to listen. She built her identity around kindness, believing that goodness would be enough to protect her. At 21, she met David Carter at a charity fundraiser she attended through her community college. He was 25 then, already working as a rising executive at a real estate firm. He was magnetic, confident, sharp, with that easy smile that made every woman in the room glance twice. But out of everyone, he chose her. At least that's what she thought. He told her she had the kind of beauty that didn't fade, the kind of soul that grounded him. He wooed her with promises and gestures that seemed straight from a fairy tale. Roses delivered to her job at the bookstore. Late-night phone calls where he whispered, "You're my future, Sophia. Nothing else matters." Within 6 months, they were inseparable. Within a year, he was down on one knee, sliding a modest but beautiful diamond onto her finger. For the first time in her life, Sophia believed she was chosen, not for her sister's beauty, not for her family's approval, but for who she was. The early years of their marriage were blissful. They lived in a small apartment with peeling paint and second-hand furniture. But she didn't care. David would pull her close at night and whisper about the future. "One day, I'll give you everything you deserve. One day, we'll live in a place where you'll never have to worry." And so she believed him. She worked extra shifts at the bookstore, saving money to support his career goals. When he studied for licensing exams, she brewed endless cups of coffee and quizzed him until dawn. She learned to cook meals on a tight budget, clipping coupons to stretch every dollar. While her friends were traveling or chasing careers, Sophia poured her energy into building David's dreams. When Olivia, her younger sister, came to live with them during college, Sophia welcomed her with open arms. She thought it was the right thing to do, family helping family. She let Olivia borrow clothes, shared makeup, and even helped her with tuition money when she could. Sophia never imagined that the same girl she once rocked to sleep would one day betray her in the cruelest way. For now, though, everything felt safe, or at least, Sophia convinced herself it did. When she discovered she was pregnant, David's reaction seemed like proof that their love was real. He lifted her in his arms, tears shining in his eyes, and said, "You've given me the greatest gift." They decorated the nursery together, painting the walls soft cream, placing a crib near the window. David would kneel and talk to her belly at night, telling their unborn child stories about the adventures they would share. But beneath the tender moments, cracks were forming. Sophia noticed how often David stayed late at the office. He brushed off her questions with vague answers. Big projects, important meetings, you know how it is. She told herself he was working hard for their future. She ignored the faint smell of perfume on his suit jacket, the missed dinners, the sudden coldness in his touch. She pushed away the ache in her chest every time Olivia dressed a little too boldly or laughed too loudly at David's jokes. She clung to denial because the alternative was too painful to face. Her pregnancy was not easy. Morning sickness drained her. Her ankles swelled, her back ached, and sleep became a stranger. Yet she soldiered on, convinced that enduring these hardships would all be worth it once their baby arrived. She cooked for David, ironed his shirts, and supported him through every work milestone, even when he forgot her doctor's appointments or dismissed her cravings with irritation. "Stop being so dramatic, Sophia," he would say when she asked for help. "I have enough pressure at work. Don't add to it." Those words hurt, but she swallowed her pain. She remembered her parents' lessons: loyalty, patience, sacrifice. Marriage was about endurance. But endurance has limits, even for the strongest heart. Sophia often lay awake at night, staring at the ceiling, one hand resting on her belly. She whispered prayers into the darkness. "Please, let him come back to me. Please, let this family be whole." The baby's kicks answered her, a rhythm of life that reminded her why she couldn't give up. Her friends noticed the sadness in her eyes, but she brushed them off. "I'm fine, just tired." Even Rachel, her closest friend and coworker, urged her to look deeper, to question David's behavior. But Sophia shook her head. "He loves me. I know he does." Her entire identity was tied to that belief, that love and loyalty were unbreakable shields, that if she just gave more, forgave more, sacrificed more, everything would fall back into place. But life had other plans. Every fairy tale has a turning point, and Sophia's came on that stormy afternoon when she carried lilies and lunch into David's office. She had no idea that the man she had built her life around, the man she defended against every doubt, would shatter her heart in one glance. She had no idea that the sister she had raised like her own child would be the one to twist the knife. The story she thought she was living, a story of sacrifice rewarded, of loyalty honored, was about to collapse in the cruelest way possible. And as she left the building in the storm, soaked and trembling, one truth became clear. Everything she had endured, every illusion she clung to, was gone. But deep in her chest, a seed of something new was taking root. It was small, fragile, but powerful. It wasn't just survival, it was rage. It was the beginning of transformation. And soon, David and Olivia would learn that the quiet, selfless woman they had betrayed was capable of becoming their greatest reckoning. Betrayal does not bloom overnight. It grows slowly, like a weed, feeding on envy, selfishness, and greed, until it strangles everything pure in its path. For Sophia Carter, that weed had been growing in the shadows of her own home, and the two people watering it were the ones she trusted most: her husband, David, and her younger sister, Olivia. David Carter was once a man who knew how to charm an entire room. He was tall, handsome, with the kind of easy confidence that made people believe in him even when they shouldn't. He knew how to smile at investors, how to shake hands with power, how to convince anyone that he was destined for greatness. But underneath the polished exterior lived a hunger that was never satisfied. Ambition had been his lover long before Olivia. David grew up with little. His father worked 2 jobs, his mother struggled with bills, and he vowed as a boy that he would never be poor again. To him, love was a luxury, but success, that was survival. When he met Sophia, she seemed perfect, sweet, loyal, forgiving. She was the kind of woman who would stand by him no matter what, the kind who would hold his hand while he climbed, even if it meant her feet were bleeding. But David was never satisfied with loyalty. What he craved was adoration, the kind that fed his ego and reminded him he was powerful. Enter Olivia. Where Sophia was gentle, Olivia was fiery. Where Sophia gave quietly, Olivia demanded loudly. Olivia was 3 years younger than Sophia, a girl who had grown up in the shadow of her sister's kindness. Teachers praised Sophia's patience, family members admired her steady heart. Olivia, meanwhile, was restless, always chasing attention, always competing against a sister who didn't even know there was a contest. When she moved in with Sophia and David during college, the seeds of betrayal were planted. Olivia watched her sister's life with thinly veiled jealousy. The nice apartment, the attentive husband, the stability she claimed to want. She smiled on the surface, but inside, envy clawed at her. And David noticed. He noticed the way Olivia lingered a little too long when she touched his arm. He noticed the way her eyes followed him across the room, sharp and hungry. He noticed the daring dresses she wore at family dinners, the way her laughter filled the spaces Sophia left silent. At first, it was innocent, at least that's what David told himself. A glance here, a joke there. But ambition and temptation make a dangerous pair. To David, Olivia was not just a woman, she was validation. She made him feel powerful in ways Sophia's quiet devotion never did. Olivia, on the other hand, saw David as more than her sister's husband. He was wealth, he was status, he was the shortcut to the kind of life she craved but couldn't build on her own. What began as stolen looks turned into whispered conversations. What began as whispered conversations turned into late-night drinks when Sophia thought David was working late. And soon, what began as temptation became betrayal. Olivia told herself she wasn't doing anything wrong. Sophia's too soft, she would mutter to her reflection. She doesn't know how to keep a man like David. He needs someone stronger, someone exciting, someone like me. David, meanwhile, justified his actions with cruel logic. Sophia doesn't understand what I need. She's always tired, always emotional. Olivia gets me. She makes me feel alive. It was a toxic dance, one fueled by ego and envy, each of them feeding off the other's hunger. Behind closed doors, they laughed at Sophia's trust. They convinced themselves she would never know, that she was too naive, too blinded by love to ever see the truth. But every secret eventually surfaces. David began slipping. He came home smelling of perfume Sophia didn't wear. He avoided her questions with irritation, snapping at her when she pressed too hard. "I'm under stress, Sophia. Don't make it worse." Olivia became bolder. She borrowed Sophia's clothes and returned them with a smug smile. She left her lipstick-stained coffee cups in David's car. At family gatherings, she sat too close, her hand brushing his under the table when no one was watching. Rachel, Sophia's best friend, noticed. She once whispered, "Something about Olivia feels off. Be careful." But Sophia, desperate to believe in family, brushed it aside. "She's my sister. She'd never hurt me." The cruelest part of betrayal is that it often hides in plain sight. Behind the office doors of Carter Enterprises, Olivia transformed from the helpful younger sister into something else entirely. She strutted through the hallways in designer heels David had bought her, whispering instructions to interns like she owned the place. To outsiders, she was just a family visitor, a familiar face. But those who looked closer saw the way David's eyes followed her, the way his smile widened when she walked in. Their affair was an open secret no one dared voice. And yet, even as David and Olivia burned with their reckless passion, there was one thing neither of them understood. Betrayal carries consequences. For David, his hunger blinded him. He believed he was untouchable, that Sophia's loyalty would keep her quiet forever. He saw her as weak, dependent, too fragile to ever walk away. He didn't realize that the very woman he underestimated had a strength waiting to rise. For Olivia, her envy poisoned her. She believed stealing Sophia's life would make her happy. She thought sitting in Sophia's chair, wearing Sophia's clothes, and holding Sophia's husband would erase the years of feeling second best. But she didn't realize that envy never satisfies. It only destroys. The day Sophia opened that office door, everything they had built in secrecy began to crack. Olivia smirked, thinking she had won. David stammered, believing he could talk his way out. But both of them underestimated the quiet fury that betrayal awakens in the human heart. Sophia walked away that day with lilies crushed underfoot and tears burning her cheeks. But she also walked away with something David and Olivia did not expect: clarity. Clarity that love built on lies was no love at all. Clarity that loyalty betrayed was no longer owed. Clarity that the woman they mocked as weak was stronger than either of them could ever imagine. And as the storm raged outside, David and Olivia laughed nervously behind closed doors, convincing themselves they still held control. But what they didn't know was that the storm had already shifted. And Sophia, broken, betrayed, and furious, was about to become their reckoning. The rain pounded against the city streets as Sophia stumbled out of the Carter Enterprises tower. Her heels splashed through puddles, the lilies she had dropped moments ago still clinging to her trembling hands. The lunch she had so carefully prepared was ruined, the box bent and leaking, but she couldn't bring herself to throw it away. It was more than food. It was a symbol of everything she thought her marriage was. And now it was shattered. The storm outside mirrored the one inside her. Her chest felt like it was splitting open, her breath shallow and uneven. She clutched her belly with one hand, terrified that the stress might harm her baby. Her vision blurred, not from the rain, but from the hot, unstoppable tears burning down her cheeks. She had walked into that office with hope. She walked out carrying betrayal so heavy it nearly broke her. She wanted to scream. She wanted to collapse right there on the sidewalk, to let the city swallow her pain. But people were everywhere, strangers rushing home, umbrellas shielding them from the storm. She kept walking, her body moving on instinct, her mind numb. "Don't fall apart, not here," she whispered to herself. Not in front of them. But inside, she was already falling. Sophia wandered aimlessly until she reached the edge of a small park. She sank onto a bench, soaked to the bone, the rain plastering her hair to her face. Her swollen feet throbbed, her back ached, but none of it compared to the hollow ache in her chest. She pressed her palms against her face, sobbing silently into the storm. The image replayed in her mind like a cruel film on repeat. Olivia's smug smile, David's guilty panic, the intimacy in their body language, the betrayal in their eyes. Her sister, her husband, the two people who were supposed to be her safe place had destroyed her. Why? The words slipped from her lips, carried away by the rain. Why would you do this to me? She thought of Olivia as a child. The little girl she used to braid hair for, the girl she protected from bullies, the girl she helped with homework. She thought of David, the man who once kissed her forehead and whispered about forever. The betrayal was so deep it didn't feel real. She looked down at her belly, whispering to her unborn child, "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." The baby shifted, as if reminding her she wasn't alone, but instead of comfort, it tore her heart further. She was supposed to bring this child into a home of love and safety. Instead, she was carrying it into chaos. The weight of her exhaustion crashed over her, and she leaned back against the wet bench, closing her eyes. For a moment, she imagined simply not waking up. For a moment, the pain felt too big to bear. Her phone buzzed in her bag, startling her. She pulled it out with trembling fingers. It was a message from Rachel, her best friend. "Dinner tomorrow? I want to check in on you and the baby." Sophia's throat tightened. How could she tell Rachel what she had just seen? How could she say the words out loud and make them real? She typed and erased several replies before shoving the phone back into her bag. The rain slowed, leaving the air heavy with silence. But silence only made her thoughts louder. She imagined confronting David again, demanding answers. But what answers could there be? She imagined begging Olivia for an explanation. But what could justify stabbing her sister in the back? No words could fix this. No apology could undo it. Her chest rose and fell in sobs until she was too drained to cry anymore. She sat in the cold, soaked park until nightfall. Only then did she force herself to move. She couldn't sit there forever. She had to go home, even if home no longer felt like a home at all. When she reached the apartment, the lights were off. David wasn't there yet, probably still with Olivia. The thought sent another wave of nausea rolling through her. She dropped her ruined lilies in the trash and set the crushed lunchbox on the counter. The quiet was deafening. She walked into the nursery. The crib stood ready, the walls painted cream, the mobile dangling with tiny stars. She placed her hand on the edge of the crib and broke down again. This was supposed to be their sanctuary. Now it felt like a lie. She lowered herself onto the rocking chair, hugging her belly. The tears came again, unstoppable. She whispered through the sobs, "What am I going to do? How am I going to raise you in this mess?" The rocking chair creaked softly under her weight. Hours passed. At some point, exhaustion dragged her into a restless sleep, her cheeks sticky with tears. But even in sleep, betrayal followed her. She dreamed of Olivia laughing while David turned away, of her parents shaking their heads in disappointment, of herself standing alone in an endless storm. When she woke, the sun was rising. Her body ached, her eyes swollen from crying, but the world outside carried on. Cars honked, birds sang, people went about their lives as if nothing had changed. For them, nothing had. For Sophia, everything had. She moved slowly into the bathroom, staring at her reflection in the mirror. Her face was pale, her eyes hollow, her hair a tangled mess. She barely recognized the woman staring back at her. For the first time, she whispered a truth she had never allowed herself to think before. "I can't do this anymore." The words felt like glass in her throat. She wanted to call Rachel. She wanted to scream to the world. She wanted to collapse into someone's arms and let them carry the weight. But she also knew no one could truly fix this. This was her breaking point. Sophia sat on the edge of the tub, gripping her knees. She rocked back and forth, whispering over and over, "You have to survive. For the baby. For the baby." Her tears fell freely, but behind them, something else began to stir. It was faint, fragile, but real. A flicker of fire, buried beneath the ashes of heartbreak. She didn't recognize it yet. She didn't know it would grow. All she knew was that she couldn't stay in this place forever. But for now, on that morning, Sophia was still at rock bottom. And rock bottom has a cruel power. It shows you everything you've lost, everything you thought you had, and everything you must become to rise again. Sophia didn't feel strong. She didn't feel powerful. She felt broken beyond repair. But the storm inside her wasn't just grief. It was changing, reshaping, preparing. And soon, the same storm that had shattered her would become the very force that rebuilt her. The morning after the storm felt unreal. Sophia sat at the kitchen table, staring at a cold cup of tea she hadn't touched. The apartment was silent, but her mind was a battlefield. Every corner of the room reminded her of David, his jacket on the chair, his half-read newspaper on the counter, his cologne still lingering in the air. She wanted to tear it all apart, to scream until her throat broke. But instead, she sat in silence, frozen, her hand resting on her belly. The baby kicked. It was a gentle reminder she wasn't alone. Her phone buzzed on the table, snapping her out of her trance. The name on the screen made her chest tighten. Rachel Nguyen. Her best friend. Her anchor. The one person she could never lie to. Sophia hesitated before answering. She didn't want to say the words out loud. Speaking them would make them real. But Rachel's persistence was legendary. If Sophia didn't answer, Rachel would be knocking at her door within the hour. With a shaky breath, Sophia picked up. "Hey!" Rachel's voice was bright at first. "Hey, mama-to-be. I was just thinking of you. How's my favorite little nephew or niece doing in there?" Sophia's throat tightened. She wanted to answer lightly, to pretend everything was fine, but her voice cracked. "Rachel?" There was a pause. Then Rachel's tone shifted instantly, sharp with concern. "What happened?" Sophia's eyes filled again. She tried to speak, but the words caught. The silence on the line stretched. Finally, Rachel said firmly, "I'm coming over. Don't argue." 20 minutes later, the doorbell rang. Sophia shuffled to the door, her body heavy from exhaustion. When she opened it, Rachel stood there holding 2 paper bags of takeout and a determined look. She pushed her way in without waiting for permission. "You look awful," Rachel said bluntly, setting the bags down. Then, softer, "Tell me what happened." Sophia collapsed onto the couch, the tears spilling before she could stop them. She told Rachel everything. The lilies, the lunch, opening the office door, seeing Olivia on David's lap, the smirk, the betrayal. She poured it all out in broken sobs, her voice cracking with each word. Rachel listened without interrupting, her hands clenched into fists, her eyes blazing with fury. When Sophia finished, silence filled the room, broken only by the sound of her sobbing. Finally, Rachel spoke. Her voice was low, dangerous. "I knew something was wrong." Sophia looked up, startled. "What do you mean?" Rachel sighed, running a hand through her dark hair. "I didn't want to believe it. I didn't want to put that weight on you while you were pregnant. But I've seen things, Sophia. Things I can't ignore anymore." Sophia's stomach tightened. "What things?" Rachel leaned forward. "I've seen David with Olivia. Not like what you described, but moments. Too close. Too familiar. The way they looked at each other at the last family dinner. The way he touched her arm, like he forgot you were sitting right there. I told myself I was imagining it, but now, Her voice hardened. Now I know I wasn't. Sophia's breath caught. You think it's been going on longer? Rachel nodded grimly. Yes. And not just that. I overheard something at Carter Enterprises last month when I was visiting a friend who works in accounting. Your husband isn't just betraying you personally, he's betraying you financially. Sophia's heart lurched. What? Rachel's eyes darkened. He's been shifting funds, using company money to cover expenses that aren't business-related. Fancy dinners, hotel stays, jewelry, and guess whose name kept popping up on those receipts? Sophia whispered. Olivia? Rachel's silence was confirmation enough. The room spun. It was one thing to know David was cheating. It was another to realize he was using the empire they had built together to fund his affair with her own sister. Sophia clutched her belly, her breath shallow. Why didn't you tell me sooner? Rachel's voice softened. Because I didn't have proof, because I thought maybe I was wrong, and because I didn't want to crush you unless I had to. But now, you need to know everything. You need to be prepared. Sophia buried her face in her hands, sobbing again. How could they do this to me? How could she? Rachel wrapped an arm around her, pulling her close. Because they're selfish, because Olivia has always envied you, and because David is weak. But listen to me, Sophia. She lifted Sophia's chin until their eyes met. You are not weak. You are not finished. They think they've broken you, but they've underestimated you. Sophia shook her head. I don't feel strong. I feel like I'm drowning. Rachel's grip tightened. Then let me be your lifeline. You don't have to fight this alone. I'm with you every step. Whatever you decide to do, I'll help you. For the first time in days, Sophia felt a flicker of warmth. It wasn't strength yet, but it was something. A reminder that she wasn't alone in this nightmare. Rachel unpacked the takeout, forcing Sophia to eat. You need energy. For you and the baby. We'll deal with David and Olivia later. Right now, we focus on keeping you safe. As they ate, Rachel began laying out possibilities. You could stay with me for a while. You could talk to a lawyer. You could gather proof. Don't rush. Just know you have options. Sophia listened, her mind swirling. The idea of lawyers, of confrontation, felt overwhelming. But for the first time she began to imagine that maybe, just maybe, she didn't have to stay powerless. After dinner, Rachel insisted on staying the night. I'm not leaving you alone. Not after this. When Sophia finally lay in bed, she still cried, but the tears felt different. They weren't just despair anymore. They were the beginning of resolve. In the quiet darkness, Rachel's words echoed in her mind. They've underestimated you. Sophia pressed her hand against her belly and whispered to her baby, we're going to be okay. I don't know how yet, but we will. The storm had broken her, yes, but with Rachel by her side, a new fire was slowly being lit. A fire that would one day burn David and Olivia's world to ashes. The following days passed like a blur. Sophia moved through them as if she were a ghost, her body present but her heart shattered. Yet beneath the numbness, something had shifted. Rachel's words echoed again and again. They've underestimated you. At first, Sophia resisted. She told herself she wasn't strong enough. Not now. Not with her body swollen and heavy from pregnancy. But every time she pictured David's guilty face and Olivia's smug smile, a spark flickered inside her. Betrayal had crushed her, yes, but it had also awakened something she didn't know she had. The will to fight back. And so, quietly, Sophia began to plan. Rachel became her confidant, the steady voice that refused to let her slip back into despair. We're not going to rush, Rachel told her one evening as they sat at the kitchen table. We'll be smart. We'll gather everything we need, and when the time comes, you'll decide how to use it. Sophia nodded, her hands trembling as she held a pen. For the first time, she started writing. Notes, details, times David had been late, expenses that didn't add up. The pages filled slowly, but each line was a piece of the puzzle, proof that her pain wasn't imagined. The first step was quiet observation. David still came home some nights, though he grew colder, distant. He avoided her eyes, muttering excuses about late meetings or client dinners. Sophia forced herself to nod, to play along, even when her stomach churned with rage. When he left, she noted the times. When he returned, she noted the perfume that wasn't hers, the faint lipstick stains he thought she wouldn't notice. Every small detail became ammunition. Rachel helped her dig deeper. Through her friend in accounting, she gathered copies of expense reports. Dinners at luxury restaurants, hotel stays, jewelry purchases that David had hidden under business entertainment. Each receipt told a story, and every story pointed back to Olivia. The betrayal became black and white, printed on paper, undeniable. But Sophia didn't stop there. She began checking David's office schedule, his business trips. Rachel's tech-savvy cousin quietly helped her retrieve call logs and text records from David's secondary phone. What she found was sickening. Messages from Olivia filled with affection, secret plans, coded words only lovers would use. Sophia read them with shaking hands, her stomach twisting, but she didn't cry this time. The tears were gone. In their place was something sharper. "This is enough to destroy him," Rachel said, slapping the papers down on the table. "He won't see it coming." But Sophia shook her head. "Not yet. If I act too soon, he'll twist it. He'll make me look hysterical. He'll say I imagined it all. I need him to expose himself in front of everyone." Her voice was steady now, cold, determined. The plan grew piece by piece. Sophia decided she would let David and Olivia believe they had won. She would play the weak wife, the blind sister. She would stay silent, keep her head down, and wait. At night, she practiced in front of the mirror. She softened her voice, smiled at David, asked gentle questions as if nothing had changed. She hated herself for it, but Rachel reminded her, "This is strategy. You're not pretending for him. You're protecting yourself until the right moment." Sophia's belly grew heavier with each passing week, but her mind grew sharper. She started documenting everything with care. Dates, locations, witnesses. Every lie David told, every smirk Olivia flashed, she stored away like weapons. One evening, David came home unusually cheerful. He kissed her cheek perfunctorily, dropped his jacket on the couch and said, "Big things are happening at the firm, Sophia. You'll be proud of me soon." She forced a smile. "I already am." Inside she thought, "You have no idea what's coming." It wasn't easy. There were nights she nearly broke, when loneliness pressed so hard against her chest she could barely breathe. She would curl up in the nursery, whispering to her baby, "I'm doing this for us, for you." The rocking chair creaked beneath her as she rocked back and forth, her heart both heavy and determined. Rachel was her lifeline. She visited often, filling the apartment with warmth. She brought food, laughter, and reminders of who Sophia used to be before betrayal hollowed her out. "You're stronger than you think," she repeated like a mantra. Slowly, Sophia began to believe it. She stopped waiting for David to come home. She stopped hoping for apologies. Instead, she used his absence as time to prepare. She organized her documents, rehearsed what she would say, envisioned the day when she would finally confront him, not in private where he could manipulate her, but in public where he could not escape. The more she planned, the less powerless she felt. The fear began to fade, replaced by something fiercer. It was Rachel who suggested the final step. "There's a gala next month, right? Carter Enterprises' annual board celebration? Perfect setting. Everyone will be there. The executives, the shareholders, the press. He loves showing off in front of them." Sophia hesitated, "And Olivia will be there too." Rachel's smile was sharp. "Exactly. Let them flaunt themselves. Then you drop the truth like a bomb. They'll never recover." Sophia's heart pounded at the thought. The idea of walking into that gala, 8 months pregnant, carrying the weight of her betrayal. It terrified her, but it also thrilled her. She pictured David's face when the evidence was revealed. She pictured Olivia's smirk vanishing, her world collapsing. And for the first time, Sophia allowed herself to smile. Not out of joy, but out of quiet, vengeful satisfaction. The plan was set. Over the next weeks, she prepared in silence. She gathered her proof, rehearsed her words, and steeled her heart. She still felt moments of weakness, at night, when she lay alone, listening to the storm of her own thoughts, but she reminded herself of the child growing inside her. "This isn't just for me," she whispered. "This is for us." The day of the gala crept closer, and with it, the end of her silence. David thought he controlled the narrative. Olivia thought she had replaced her sister. But what neither of them knew was that Sophia, the woman they believed too weak to fight back, had turned her heartbreak into a weapon. And when she unleashed it, their carefully crafted world would crumble. The night of the gala arrived like the climax of a storm. For weeks, Sophia had lived in silence, her heart beating with equal parts dread and determination. Tonight would decide everything. Tonight she would step out of the role of the betrayed wife and reveal the truth for all to see. The venue was the grand ballroom of the Harrington Hotel, an opulent space drenched in golden chandeliers and velvet drapes. Crystal glasses clinked, laughter echoed off marble floors, and the city's elite paraded in gowns and tuxedos that gleamed beneath the light. To outsiders, it was a night of celebration, a tribute to Carter Enterprises' rising success. But to Sophia, it was the stage where masks would finally fall. Rachel stood beside her in the car before they entered, squeezing her hand. "Are you ready?" Sophia smoothed the silk of her navy gown, the fabric tailored carefully to fit her swollen belly. "Ready or not," she whispered, "it ends tonight." Inside, heads turned as she walked in. Gasps rippled through the room. Some guests hadn't seen her in months. Others had whispered rumors about David's coldness, about Sophia's absence from social gatherings. But no one expected her to appear like this, elegant, radiant, and unbroken. David, standing near the stage with a glass of champagne, froze when he saw her. His smile faltered, his hand tightening around Olivia's waist. Olivia wore a crimson gown that clung to her figure, her lips painted with the same smugness Sophia remembered from that office. She leaned in to whisper something to David, but Sophia caught the flicker of unease in her eyes. Sophia didn't approach them immediately. Instead, she moved gracefully through the crowd, greeting old acquaintances, shaking hands, letting her presence spread like a quiet fire. Every step was deliberate, every smile calculated. Let them wonder, let them feel her shadow before she even spoke. Rachel followed close, carrying a slim leather folder tucked under her arm. Inside it was the evidence, the receipts, the call logs, the photographs. Proof that would cut through lies sharper than any blade. The night unfolded with speeches and toasts. David basked in the applause of shareholders, his arm around Olivia as if she were a simple guest, nothing more. But Sophia saw the way he leaned toward her, the way Olivia's hand brushed his. They still thought they controlled the story. And then, the moment came. The chairman of the board raised his glass. "Tonight, we honor David Carter, a man whose vision has carried this company into new heights." Applause thundered. David stepped forward, beaming, ready to deliver his polished speech. But before he could begin, Sophia rose from her seat near the front. The room fell silent. Her voice was calm, steady, yet it carried through the ballroom like a bell. "Before my husband speaks," she said, "I'd like to share a story. Our story." Every eye turned to her. David's face paled. "Sophia, sit down," he muttered, his voice low and urgent. But she didn't. She stepped onto the stage, her heels clicking against the polished floor, her gown sweeping behind her like armor. She turned to face the crowd, her hand resting protectively on her belly. "When I married David," she began, "I believed I was marrying loyalty. I believed I was marrying a man who would honor his vows. For years, I stood by his side, sacrificing, supporting, believing. Even when he grew distant, I held on, because that's what love is supposed to do. It endures." Murmurs rippled through the audience. David shifted uncomfortably, forcing a smile. "Sweetheart, this isn't the time." Sophia raised her hand, silencing him. Her voice grew stronger. "But sometimes endurance becomes blindness. And sometimes, the people you trust most are the ones who betray you." Gasps echoed. Olivia stiffened, her painted smile faltering. Sophia turned to Rachel, who stepped forward and handed her the folder. Sophia opened it with deliberate calm, pulling out the first receipt. "Here," she said, holding it up for the crowd. "A dinner for two at La Lumiere, charged to the company of Client Entertainment. Except, no client was present, only David and my sister Olivia." A murmur swept the room. Sophia laid down another paper. "Hotel stays, jewelry, private getaways, all billed under business expenses." And here, she pulled out a series of printed messages, the words glowing like poison across the page. "Private conversations between my husband and my sister. Conversations no brother-in-law should ever have." Olivia shot to her feet, her face red. "She's lying." But Sophia's voice cut through her protest like steel. "Am I? Then explain this." She held up a photograph, one Rachel's contact had captured discreetly outside Carter Enterprises. David and Olivia, their hands entwined, their lips too close. The room erupted in whispers, gasps, and disbelief. Cameras flashed. Shareholders exchanged stunned looks. David stepped forward, his voice desperate. "Sophia, stop this. You're emotional, you're pregnant, you don't know what you're saying." But Sophia turned to him, her eyes blazing. "No, David, for the first time, I see everything clearly. You betrayed me. You betrayed this company. And you did it with my own sister?" Her words struck like thunder. Olivia lunged forward, her voice shrill. "She's making this up. She's jealous. She can't stand that you love me now." The crowd gasped again. Olivia's own words had exposed her. David's face collapsed in panic. He grabbed her arm, hissing, "Shut up." But it was too late. The damage was done. Sophia turned back to the board members, her voice steady. "This company deserves leadership built on integrity, not deceit. You trusted David with your resources, and he used them for lies. You trusted him with your name, and he dragged it through filth. I may be 8 months pregnant, but I refuse to stay silent while the man who vowed to protect me destroys everything he touches." The ballroom roared with voices. Outrage, shock, condemnation. Reporters scribbled furiously. Cameras turned from David's pale face to Sophia's unyielding stance. Rachel stepped up beside her, lifting the folder. "All of this has been documented, and copies have already been delivered to the board." David's shoulders slumped, his charm shattered. Olivia yanked her arm away, her face twisted with rage. The empire they had built on lies was crumbling before them, brick by brick. Sophia took a deep breath, her hand pressing against her belly. For the first time in months, she felt strong. Not broken, not weak, strong. She looked out at the crowd, her voice calm. "They thought they had destroyed me. But tonight I stand here not as a victim, but as a woman who refuses to be silenced." And with that, she stepped down from the stage, leaving David and Olivia standing in the wreckage of their own betrayal. The night of the gala marked a turning point in Sophia's life. When she stepped down from that stage, leaving David and Olivia exposed in front of hundreds, she wasn't the same woman who had walked into his office weeks earlier carrying lilies and a lunchbox. That woman had been naive, trusting, willing to endure anything in the name of love. That woman had died the moment she saw her sister on her husband's lap. The Sophia who left the gala was someone new. The world outside the Harrington Hotel still buzzed with rain, the streets glistening beneath street lamps. Reporters shouted questions, flashes lit the night sky, and chaos reigned behind her in the ballroom. But Sophia walked out calm, steady, Rachel at her side, her hand resting on her belly. The storm was no longer around her. It was inside her, fueling her, reshaping her. For the first time in months, she felt powerful. In the days that followed, headlines exploded. CEO's affair with wife's sister exposed at gala. Carter scandal rocks shareholders. Pregnant wife brings receipts, literally. The story spread like wildfire across business columns, tabloids, even morning talk shows. Strangers who once pitied Sophia now admired her courage. She wasn't just a betrayed wife anymore. She was the woman who stood up, pregnant and unbroken, and faced down 2 people who had tried to destroy her. David's empire began to crumble. The board launched an investigation, freezing his accounts and stripping his authority. Olivia vanished from social circles, her once smug smile replaced by shame. For the first time, they were the ones hiding, not Sophia. But transformation isn't just about destroying others. It's about rebuilding yourself. Sophia started with the simplest things. She cut her hair, trimming away the long, heavy locks that had always been David's favorite. She wanted to look in the mirror and see someone new, someone who belonged only to herself. The shorter style framed her face differently, sharper, stronger. Next, she cleaned the apartment. She bagged up David's clothes, his cologne bottles, the photographs of their happy years. Each item she tossed was a weight lifted. The apartment felt lighter, brighter, more hers. Rachel was her partner in every step. They laughed as they painted over the beige walls David had chosen, covering them with soft blues and creams that reflected peace instead of control. They turned the nursery into a sanctuary not of promises broken, but of hope for the future. "You're glowing," Rachel said one afternoon as they stepped back to admire the fresh paint. Sophia smiled. For once it wasn't forced. "I feel free." Freedom was a new language, and Sophia was learning it quickly. She began taking slow walks through the park, not to escape but to breathe. She joined prenatal yoga classes, surrounding herself with women whose laughter and warmth reminded her she wasn't alone. She even reconnected with her love of teaching, tutoring neighborhood kids in the evenings, rediscovering the joy of helping others. But her transformation wasn't just personal. It was strategic. Rachel encouraged her to meet with a lawyer, a woman named Marisol Alvarez, who had built a reputation for dismantling powerful men who underestimated their wives. Sitting across from Marisol's sleek desk, Sophia laid out her story. Marisol listened carefully, her pen moving quickly across a yellow legal pad. "You have more than enough for divorce and custody," Marisol said firmly. "But we're not just going for that. We're going to make sure David doesn't walk away with his reputation intact. You have leverage. We'll use it." Sophia's stomach fluttered with nerves, but also with exhilaration. For the first time, the future didn't terrify her. It beckoned. Her confidence grew with each passing day. She updated her wardrobe, not to impress anyone else, but to reflect the woman she had become. Flowy maternity dresses gave way to sleek, powerful outfits that reminded her of who she was. Not a victim, but a survivor. When she walked into a room now, people no longer whispered in pity. They stared in awe. But perhaps the biggest change was inside her. Where she once doubted, she now believed. Where she once whispered apologies to her unborn child, she now spoke promises. At night, as she rocked gently in the nursery chair, she pressed her hand to her belly and whispered, "We're going to be okay. Mama's strong now, and I'll make sure no one ever hurts us again." The baby kicked as if in agreement, and tears filled her eyes, not of sorrow, but of gratitude. Still, transformation is never without challenges. There were nights she felt the weight of loneliness, moments when she woke from dreams of David's betrayal, drenched in sweat and grief. But now, instead of collapsing, she faced the pain head-on. She let herself cry, then wiped her tears and stood again. She was no longer waiting to be saved. She was saving herself. Rachel watched the change with pride. "Do you see it?" she asked one evening as they shared tea. "See what?" Sophia replied. "The woman you've become, the one I always knew was there, the one they tried to bury but couldn't." Sophia's smile trembled. "I'm starting to see her." And as the weeks passed, the woman grew stronger. David tried calling, of course. At first it was apologies. "Sophia, I made a mistake. Please, let's talk." Then it was anger. "You've ruined everything. Do you know what you've done?" Finally, it was desperation. "Think of the baby, Sophia. Don't do this." But Sophia didn't answer, not once. Each unanswered call was another victory. Each ignored message was another step away from the woman who had once begged for his love. By the time her due date drew near, Sophia was no longer broken. She was ready. Ready for motherhood, ready for freedom, ready for the final confrontation that would close this chapter for good. She had walked through fire and come out forged anew. The girl who once believed endurance meant love had become a woman who knew endurance meant power. And now, with her transformation complete, she wasn't just preparing to face David and Olivia again, she was preparing to finish them. The weeks after the gala had changed everything. Sophia's transformation had stunned those who once pitied her. No longer the quiet wife who endured silently, she had become a force of her own, calm, steady, unbreakable. And yet, one final act remained. David and Olivia still lingered like shadows, desperate to salvage what they had left. The board of Carter Enterprises had suspended David, freezing his accounts, but the final decision, whether he would be permanently removed, was to be announced at a shareholder meeting. Olivia, ever arrogant, had whispered to mutual acquaintances that Sophia's emotional stunt wouldn't last. "She's just pregnant and hormonal," she scoffed. "They'll forget soon enough. David will bounce back. He always does." But Olivia was wrong. Sophia had been silent for weeks, letting the scandal simmer, letting the press dig deeper. Behind the scenes, she and Rachel worked with Marisol, her lawyer, to prepare the finishing blow. Tonight, in the same ballroom where David once celebrated his power, Sophia would deliver justice. The shareholder meeting was packed, a sea of suits and cameras. The air buzzed with tension. Reporters whispered about the betrayed wife who had turned the city upside down. Investors murmured nervously about their money, their reputations. David arrived looking thinner, his once polished suit hanging awkwardly on his frame. He tried to smile, but the charm was gone. His eyes darted nervously, as if searching for allies. Olivia clung to his arm, dressed in black this time, her face pale. The smugness that once defined her had vanished. And then Sophia entered. The room hushed. She walked with grace, her navy gown hugging her figure, her hand resting on her belly that was now heavy and full term. Rachel walked at her side, carrying another leather folder. Marisol followed, calm and formidable. Together, they were a team, unstoppable. David stood when he saw her, his voice breaking. "Sophia, you shouldn't be here. Please." But Sophia didn't even glance at him. She took her place at the front of the room, her chin high, her eyes steady. The chairman called the meeting to order, but Sophia lifted her hand. "Before we proceed," she said, her voice clear and unwavering, "I have something to share." The room went silent. Cameras pointed, pens poised. "I came here not just as David's wife, but as a shareholder of this company. You see, while David was busy betraying his vows, he also forgot that the assets he used to fund his affair were not his alone. They belonged to Carter Enterprises. And as of last month—" She paused, turning toward Rachel, who handed her a document. "A controlling share of this company belongs to me." Gasps exploded through the room. David's face drained of color. "What are you talking about?" Sophia smiled coldly. "You thought I was blind, David. You thought I was weak. But while you and Olivia laughed behind my back, I was preparing. I've acquired shares quietly through allies, through the very people you dismissed. Today, I stand not as your wife, but as the majority shareholder." The board members exchanged stunned looks. The chairman cleared his throat, adjusting his glasses. "Is this true?" Marisol stepped forward, placing the documents on the table. "It is. Mrs. Carter now holds 51% of Carter Enterprises. She has legal control." The room erupted. Reporters shouted questions. Shareholders murmured, the sound a storm of disbelief. David stumbled forward, his voice frantic. "Sophia, you can't do this. You're my wife. You're supposed to support me." Sophia turned to him, her gaze icy. "A wife supports a husband who honors her. You chose betrayal, you chose greed, and now you face the consequences." Olivia hissed, her voice sharp. "You can't ruin us like this. We belong here." Sophia's eyes cut to her sister, her voice steady. "You never belonged here, Olivia. You stole, you lied, you broke the one bond you should have protected, and now you'll lose everything." She turned back to the board. "As controlling shareholder, my first act is to move for David Carter's immediate removal as CEO. His misuse of company funds, his abuse of power, and his personal misconduct have made him unfit to lead. The evidence is here." She gestured to Rachel, who opened the folder, spreading receipts, statements, and photographs across the table. "Every dollar he stole, every lie he told, it's documented." The board members reviewed the evidence, their faces grim. Within minutes, the chairman announced, "The vote is unanimous. David Carter is hereby removed as CEO of Carter Enterprises." The room erupted again, this time in applause. Cameras flashed, reporters shouted, shareholders nodded in approval. David collapsed into his chair, his head in his hands. Olivia stood frozen, her lips trembling. Sophia, however, stood tall. "This isn't just about me," she said, addressing the room. "This is about every woman who has been betrayed, every partner who has been silenced, every voice that's been dismissed as weak. I may be pregnant, I may have been betrayed, but I am not broken. I am proof that strength can rise from heartbreak." Tears filled the eyes of some in the audience. Even hardened executives shifted uncomfortably, humbled by her words. Rachel squeezed her hand. Marisol nodded with pride. Sophia turned back to David one last time. "You told me once that I couldn't survive without you. But look at me, David. I'm standing stronger than ever. And you? You have nothing left." Her words struck him harder than any blow. The meeting adjourned, chaos spilling into the hallway. Reporters clamored for statements, cameras flashing relentlessly. But Sophia didn't stop for them. She walked past, serene, her hand on her belly. She had said what she needed to say. The rest was noise. Outside, the sun broke through the clouds, golden light spilling across the city streets. Sophia paused, closing her eyes, letting the warmth touch her face. For the first time in months, she felt at peace. Rachel leaned close. "You did it. You really did it." Sophia smiled softly. "No, we did it, and now it's time to live again." Her transformation was complete. Justice was served. David and Olivia were left in ruins, their empire shattered by the very woman they had underestimated. And Sophia? She walked into her new life not as a victim, not even just as a survivor, but as a mother, a leader, and a woman reborn. So that's how the story closes, my dear friends. If you're still here with me right now, it means something in Sophia's journey touched your heart. Remember, As the Stoics said, we suffer more in imagination than in reality. Strength is born in pain. If this spoke to you, please like, share, and subscribe. Let's keep healing together.